become the podcast? How do you become anything you dream, you declare, you commit, and success is your next breath? This is part 2 of my time with my mentor, JP. And I know he said that the mentor-mentee relationship is a vertical. He likes the coaching metaphor better because it's a horizontal thing. I'm coaching him, he's coaching me, we're coaching each other, we're learning from one another. But I think for most of us, mentor makes a lot more sense than the concept of coach. So I'll just do that to make it simplistic. But as I said before, we're going to go into part 2 of this time with JP. And so already he's given us some really, 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 really good concepts. And so we were talking about his concept, his rule, where you gotta, get so you use that concept from a professional standpoint and a personal standpoint. So
Absolutely.
That concept of if you got something to say, you got something that's on your mind, get rid of it. And this is very relevant. That concept is very relevant to today because I think the thing that we're starting to see is that these microaggressions, these small moments, they mount and they become in itself a macro aggression, and that's where people start losing their mind. And so, like you said, it could be a facial expression, it could be an eye roll, it could be a slight, or it could be a joke that maybe one-on-one.
Body language.
Yeah, body language. Maybe one-on-one we do the joke, it's not a big deal. I do this joke among other people, now all of a sudden it's a bigger deal. And now that's the small stuff. And then we have some other, it could be, watching something from afar, secondhand conversations, all these things that eventually have a huge impact. And I think most people sit on them. They sit on them, they let them fester. They in that energy, that negative energy that isn't attended to, that isn't confronted, becomes it destroys relationships. It can put the person who's harvesting all these negative emotions, it could put them in bondage. You know what I'm saying? Now all of a sudden they can't move. Now they're paralyzed by themselves. And so this is an awesome concept for groups and also relationships. Let's get this stuff out. And I think it seems petty. It seems petty to do that. But
and
it seems petty to do that. And that's not what I want. Well, let me can I use but so I can finish 1 second? I don't know the other way to say it. It seems petty to do that, but it's what we need now. We need the opportunity to say, listen, I was kind of caught off guard by what you just said. I saw what you did. I need to talk about it. I got to confront this. And
tell me this one, instead of saying confront, say explore.
Explore, yeah. That sounds, yeah.
It's all about respect.
Yeah.
Respect for the individual is the way that I see it.
Mm-hmm. And so just by simply being able to explore what was said, what was seen, you get an understanding of where that person may have been coming from, or you help that person understand what they may have done. And
Absolutely. I've had working professionally, I've had people share with me what they felt was a negative reaction on my part,
mm-hmm.
and it was because I didn't hear it.
Mm-hmm.
We all know that when we're concentrating on something,
mm-hmm.
we may not hear clearly.
Sure.
Or at all.
Maybe in a zone.
Yeah, exactly.
And you say the last podcast, you're working to be 2 and 3 steps ahead. So now if you're working to be 2 and 3 steps ahead, there's this balance of
and in the moment at the same time.
So you're balancing being present, but also being in the future, so you can anticipate based upon everything that you've experienced doing this work. I know how this thing typically plays out. I've done a good survey of the personalities in the room. I know what the challenges and the issues are. So it's only natural that you start playing the game 2 and 3 steps ahead, but doing that can sometimes make you liable, make you liable, not liable, but it could force you to kind of miss a detail or two.
Exactly. Well, you're a great basketball aficionado. Think
So.
of it as a coach.
Mm-hmm.
They have to be in the moment, and they got to be 2 or 3 steps ahead. So if a player says something to him and he or she doesn't respond, what's the player's got? The player has, as you said many times, it's all about attitude. Mm-hmm. Am I going to now feel anger toward the coach because he or she didn't respond to me?
Yeah.
Or am I going to say, hey, coach, we got the 24-hour rule. I said this. And you got to do it at the right time and in a respectful manner. Mm-hmm. And the coach can just plainly say, hey, and this happened. I didn't hear it.
There's a lot of times I've been on the bench, and maybe a kid was rocking and rolling. His stat line wasn't off the hook or off the charts, but he was rocking and rolling. Good energy, making the right plays, making the hockey assists. But the stat line may not show that he was rocking and rolling. But he's playing really good, and then that kid doesn't get back in the game, and then coach says, I forgot about you. And especially on our level, in the NAI level, now at Concordia, we've been fortunate enough to have, somebody like myself who's in the area, who works for themselves, so I've always been a part of the staff. I had the time to dedicate to practices and the games, but we would have an assistant coach, myself, and then the head coach. When you talk about Division I coaches, they got about 6 people on staff. So there's more than enough people to kind of keep you aware of all these very important things. Somebody might be there just to keep track of minutes played per person. But on our level, the coach has got to, for a while, I know our coach, Chip, he used to have to drive us there to the game.
Bus.
In the bus. So you got to drive there. You got to
pick the restaurant to eat your pregame meal, carry the balls.
Yeah, and then also, you got to work about a game, implementing or executing the game scheme, figure out what they're doing, make adjustments, so on and so forth. Oh, and by the way, I got to figure out if I can get everybody in this game. So that makes a lot of sense.
I'll tell you, when you were saying that, I remember watching Chip. I don't know, you were on the team, so not sure if you ever noticed, but when you would have a timeout, Chip's behavior was he'd take two or three steps out onto the court by himself, and you could just, my assumption of what he was doing, man, his brain was spinning, and he needed that quiet time to kind of get himself. Well, if you talk to him during that quiet time,
you're right. We would sit down, and he would take some time, and you would think you only got either 60 seconds or you got 30 seconds, and you would think you want all those minutes, all those seconds to, you would maximize that time. But I always thought it was impressive. It's so cool of him to take 5 or 10 seconds to figure out how he wanted to approach the team. Does he want to get after us? Does he want to love on us? Does he want to encourage us? So on and so forth. And then come back to the action and kind of get after. I thought it was always impressive. But so let's get back to the action.
Okay, so just quick review. We were talking as we're finishing up that first one. We were talking about listening, and we talked about listening to understand and listening in the same way you would like to be listened to, and we talked about the 24-hour rule.
Yeah.
Another really valuable thing that I found, especially with my sons, and I also use it in my professional work, is when I'm sharing information with my sons and I want to ensure that they're understanding it, I use a technique called teach back.
Yeah.
And how that works for me is I'll use choose one of my sons, Christian. Mm-hmm. So I'll say, Christian, we're having a discussion. C note, okay. Along that line too, Mar's comment about C note, he kind of failed. No, he didn't. He blatantly failed to remember the magnificent impact he had on our son, Christian, who he labeled C note, in terms of his mentoring and coaching, when Christian was actually the ball boy for the Concordia basketball team. And I remember frequently during timeouts where Chip would be given instructions, and Christian at that time, I think was a 4th or 5th grader, and Marv would be squirting him with the drink water. So we're most grateful for that. So the teach back concept is, again, to repeat myself, when I'm speaking with somebody and I want to ensure that I'm communicating clearly,
sure,
I will precede my statements with something to that effect. And I'll say, I'll use Marv again. Marv, I'm going to say something to you that I think is really important. Mm-hmm. And just to ensure that I'm communicating clearly, I'm going to ask you to repeat what you heard me say when I finish. Mm-hmm. Is that something you're willing to agree to? Mm-hmm. Okay. So the listener agreed, and we'll go through, and I'll share with him. And I said, now, again, I want to be respectful to you, Marv. Please tell me what you heard me say so that you can confirm that I'm communicating clearly. I put the onus on me as the speaker. Mm-hmm. Because in every communication, there's two sides. There's the listen side and the speak side. So if you can repeat to me what I've said and it makes sense, then good stuff. Mm-hmm. If you're having a challenge repeating it back, then we can talk about it and get it clear. But what that does to me, I learned this especially well in 2010, 2011 when I was working with doctor offices. And I'd like you all just to think for a moment about when you've gone to a doctor appointment. Me not being the sharpest crayon in the box when it comes to medical terms, how many times have we ourselves personally, or have we been with somebody who will listen to a healthcare provider give us information that we do not understand? Mm-hmm. And they ask, are there any questions? Mm-hmm. Well, we're unconsciously incompetent. We don't even know what we don't know. Mm-hmm. So most often what I observed was the doctor or the PA or whoever it is gives us the information, mm-hmm. says, is there any questions? And you say no. Or they say, do you understand? And you say yes. But what hasn't happened is we haven't provided a process for the medical personnel to mm-hmm. confirm that the patient or the patient's family or caregivers mm-hmm. understood it or even had a question about it, because we asked, do you understand mm-hmm. or do you have questions? Well, we're unconsciously incompetent in terms of the questions. Mm-hmm. And do you understand? That's like sometimes when we get that question, do you understand? It's saying, are you smart?
Yeah.
And so we don't do it. But what we helped and coached the physicians through is exactly what we did, the teach back. Mm-hmm. Marv, I'm going to give you some information about what we're finding out with your medical care. Mm-hmm. When I'm done, just to ensure that I'm communicating clearly and you understand it, mm-hmm. I'd like you to repeat it to me when you're done.
Sure.
Because you're the most important thing in my life right now, your health care. Mm-hmm. So it clears up communication.
Yeah.
So that's the teach back. With my sons, I would do that process. I would, confirm and review. Mm-hmm. And then I'm going to ask the next question is, so you've understood that, you fed it back to me. So how does that apply to you? Or how does that apply to this situation? So that's the coaching piece mm-hmm. that goes with that. I'll tell you an interesting story again, looping back to the coaching of the 7th and 8th grade girls basketball team. We had a beautiful young woman. Her spirit was absolutely beautiful. Pretty big ball, for a 7th, 8th grader. She had good size. Wanted to learn. Mm-hmm. And her dad was the other coach. Mm-hmm. And I observed this on several occasions where her dad would instruct her and coach her on if it was what position you were supposed to be in the play, which hand should you be using to shoot, whatever it was, skill, talent mm-hmm. with basketball. And my observation of Devin was she'd kind of do a little head bob and a shoulder shake and kind of say, in a not openly disrespectful, but disrespectful manner of, Dad, you really don't know what you're talking about.
And let's make this clear.
I'll get to that in a minute. I'll get to that in a minute to prove the point. You're absolutely right where I'm going, Mark. Yeah. So I would observe this a couple times, and Coach and I talked about it. So when this would happen, I'd wait a few minutes, and I'd go over and I'd find Devin. I said, Devin, come over here. I'd like to talk to you about some stuff. And I would tell him pretty much the same thing mm-hmm. that her father, the coach, would tell her.
Yes.
And she would react to me like I was Albert Einstein. There
Yes.
couldn't anybody been smarter in the world than me.
Absolutely.
And I'd look at the other coach, and he'd look at me and kind of nod and shake, and so on. And this is where I'm going. So, Marv, you tell who the father was in this.
Her father. Now I'm drawing a blank on his name.
Ray Scott.
Ray Scott was an NBA coach. Not only was he an NBA coach, he was the coach of the year. He's the NBA coach of the year, and had a long played in the NBA
18 years.
Yeah, and has had a long relationship in the NBA with the Detroit Pistons, and so I think it's hilarious that his daughter wouldn't listen to him. And it's funny because I have a lot of parents who ask me to talk to their kids, and sometimes I know what they want me to talk to their kids about, or sometimes they just like, can you just talk to my kid? I just heard you talking. Can you come talk to my kid about this? And so I'll talk to that kid about something relative to what the parents ask me. And I'll be using the same verbiage, the same cues, giving the same advice that they heard from their parents. And it's one thing where I'm doing a good job giving this speech to this kid. It's another thing when the parents start looking at me like, you're saying exactly what I said talking to my kid. And so it's something about, and I think you mentioned this, I think, in our conversation prior to the podcast, and you said it in a very efficient way, but it's something about the power of someone else saying what we normally say to our kids. Like if someone else saying to our kids what we normally say, that secondary voice is the most intelligent, insightful, elegant, eloquent, wise, but everything. But then when you say it, it's like that is the most idiotic, dull-witted. I don't believe you. I don't believe you're my father. How are you so stupid? You're like, well, my man just said the same thing, and you thought it was the most intelligent thing. Yeah. But there's something to it, man.
And again, this was a 7th and 8th grade team, so the girls were in that puberty thing. Mm-hmm. But I loop it back to what we talked earlier in the previous session: emotional listening. Our children hear the critical adult when they're getting coached. And our eldest son Christian and I went through this, and we found out I couldn't coach him because he heard the critical father instead of the coach. That was the voice he heard. So I think there's similarities of what's going on there, of the emotional listening.
Man, oh my gosh! I was at Concordia University, and we did some. There was a person who had this concept about there's 3 different ways in which we communicate, and it was like 3 different personalities. And one was a critical parent. I think one of them may have been the child, and something else might have been, I don't know. But there was some like extreme character that was the critical adult. There was maybe like a child something or other that was just completely irresponsible. Kind of the being your kid's friend and not necessarily being their parent, or being not what you need to be for your kids. So there's like these 2 extremes, and there was something right in the middle, some happy medium where you're still connecting to where that you're using your imagination, you're empathizing and understanding where this person is, but then you're not being critical, but you're making sure that you position the information or the content or the advice or whatever, you're presenting it in a certain way so that you're connecting, but you are also giving some truth. You know what I'm saying? And I can't remember it, but you're right. There is these moments where even at my age, Sarah sometimes get after me, and I realize I've been lately, I've been so defensive of myself because of her critique. So defensive that before I know it, I'm in defense mode. And we talk about the amygdala?
Amygdala part of the brain.
So that's responsible for
emotion,
right? So you have emotion, and then so every time, so this is the limbic system. We're going to get back to the action, but you have the limbic system where it's responsible for emotion. So every time we have an experience, it attaches an emotion to it. sends it down to the hippocampus for storage. That's our memory. And then there's this thing called the anterior cingulate cortex, which is responsible for behavior. And anytime we are triggered, microaggression, macroaggression, whatever, anytime we are triggered and we experience a situation similar to the emotional experience we have locked in, it sends it down to the anterior cingulate cortex, and before long, a behavior is produced.
Involuntary.
We have no control over it. It's out before we can even get to it.
Have you ever been in an experience, Marv, or you've been in a situation, probably maybe with Sarah, and something comes out of your mouth and you go, where in heaven's name did that come from? That is the most stupid thing I could have said, and I couldn't control it. It just came out.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
So as we talk about these behaviors that we sometimes have, the emotional listening, before you know it, we haven't even given ourselves a chance to process what we've actually heard. And that is why this process of, I'm going to say what I'm going to say. I want you to repeat it back. Give yourself a chance to hear it. Give yourself a chance to process it. So you can decide, is this information, on what level does it connect? And if it doesn't, that's fine. But at least you gave the kid or the person that you're dealing with an opportunity to explore it. And then from there, let's now talk about it in a way that's healthy, in a way that's, that makes sense. Because sometimes you're right, we listen with our emotions, and you're like, why are you yelling at me? And the person can I'm not yelling at you at all.
Well, you're going to learn that as your boys and Lucy get older. I'm telling you this. You can bank on this. That you and or Sarah will be talking to one of the kids, and they're going to say, "Dad, Mom, why are you so mad at me?" And you're going to look at one another and go,
"It happened yesterday."
You go.
We were at Whole Foods. Now my son he thinks I'm crazy. He thinks I'm crazy, and so he is like, I'm not dealing with that dude. I'm not dealing with that dude. I'm not dealing with him. But with Sarah, they lose it. They try to lose it on Sarah. And I was watching them from afar. It was time to get something to eat. Marv was playing video games. Sarah said, Marv, quit your game. It's time to go get something to eat. Marv didn't want to. So he's already upset. So we go to Whole Foods. They don't have anything to eat. And so Sarah says, what's wrong with you? Do you have an attitude? He says, I don't have an attitude. And she says, yes, you do. He was like, why are you yelling at me? Why are you so mad at me?
Yeah.
And she was like, I'm actually asking what's wrong with you. Like, what is the problem?
Yeah.
But it's that listening. And it took him a while to figure out that you're not actually mad at me. You're actually inquiring about my state.
And you interrupted him.
And that was the real thing. That was the real problem.
Yeah.
That was the real problem that we had to get beyond, and eventually he got over.
And that's one of the what's the word I want to say? I think that the video games have had a huge impact on this phenomenon because of what's going on in the kids' brains while they're playing the video game, and then all of a sudden mom or dad come in and interrupt them. Not only are they concerned about finishing the game or getting the points or whatever it is, but they're getting interrupted, and that's not the way that video games work. So the more often that kids play video games, I think there's going to be greater incidence of that anger response.
I really want to know your opinion, and we'll save it for another time, but your opinion on Marv's having a hard time dealing with competition. And he's never been competitive in his life. He's only 10. We didn't put him into competitive sports or organized sports. And so now his first experience with competition is this video game. And he's having a hard time dealing with how to compete, how to keep his emotions in check. So we're not gonna do it now. I know you had a lot of rules about TV and competition, video games, but the kids did play sports. But I would like to know your opinion on competitiveness and how to create a healthy, competitive atmosphere. And so we'll save that for another time. But let's see if we can get back to where we were.
Let's just wrap up listening then. Good stuff, Marv. Pleasure to be here. So as I was learning these lessons, and especially from Ray and Devin, the lesson that it taught me was, to repeat what you said just a few moments ago, our kids can hear other people much more clearly than they can hear us.
Exactly.
For a number of reasons.
Sure.
And so what the lesson that it taught me was, again, I seem to be talking about our eldest son, Christian, but I think he broke his way through the wall of life with his face. And he provided lessons for his younger brothers, Graham and Landon. So he was in a position in high school, early days of needing to focus, and so I gave him an assignment, as a former teacher would, and he was required to interview a minimum of 10 people with a series of questions that we developed, and the topic of the questions the topic of the study he was doing was, what is required to be a successful high school scholar athlete? And he would ask these questions of these different people. And he asked, they were all sports people. They were trainers. They were they were other coaches. They were, but that was the beginning of information interviews.
Yeah.
And he carried that on, and he still does that in his life, helping with interviews, to the point of one of the people that he interviewed, one of his final questions was, what suggestions would you offer me? And two stories I'll tell you on this. One of them, it was he attended Bowling Green University, and one of the people he interviewed suggested that he get business cards as a college student athlete.
Yeah.
And so he called me afterwards. He says, what do you think I should do? And I said, well, what do you think you should do? And he said, get business cards. I said, yeah, go on, what's the website?
There's a bunch of them. Instaprint?
Instaprint.
Yeah.
I said, design one, get it, order it today. You'll have it probably in 48 hours. And so he did that, and then after he would do an information interview, he would always do a handwritten thank you note. And so when he sent his thank you note to Mike Wilcox, the guy that told him to get a business card, he sent some of his business cards. And 4 years later, Mike Wilcox invites him to join his wealth management firm.
That's how I got my first job. That's one of the first things you told me to do, and it's information that I give to everyone else. You told me, one of the first pieces of information you told me, you said, you need to have a conversation, have a meeting with the president of Concordia University, and ask him basically, like, how do I utilize my Concordia degree? How do I utilize this? I've been here for 4 years. How do I utilize it? And from there, they took a liking to me, and I got my first job in admissions. And I don't know how many times. Just a couple of days ago, I'm talking to another young lady who's going through her job search. She has a job, doesn't like it, and I tell her, well, you want to do this? Find out who that person is. She said she wants to be event manager, event coordinator. I said, well, they just filled that job out. Go reach out to that person, and if that person will talk to you and tell you how they got the job, what the experience that she had prior to, now you know what you got to do. Today, she's going on a job shadowing type of thing, and she says, but Mark, this is stupid. I'm going on a job shadowing thing for a job they've already filled. I said, no, it's not stupid. I said, make those people fall in love with you. I said, the fact that you're going on a job shadowing experience for something that has already been filled, it shows a level of commitment, eagerness, curiosity, commitment, whatever, that you never know how that might benefit you long term. So here's some information that you've used with your sons. You've used it with me. I still use it for myself. And I'm now sharing that with other people. I can tell you stories upon stories of kids, or not kids, with young adults who have, after they hear the information, they're like, this sounds stupid, but okay. And then they do it, and something always good comes from those things. And like you said, Christian got a nice gig. I'm doing what he did.
Yeah. Well, there was more to it, but that was the first step.
Yeah.
So just to wrap up the listening piece, understand that your children can hear other people more clearly than they can hear you.
Sure.
The other thing that Christian that sticks out in my mind with Christian is one of the people he interviewed, who was actually a student when I was doing some youth employment grant programs with the city. 10, 15 years later, he talks with Christian and says, in response to Christian's, what suggestion would you offer me? He said, form a board of directors while you're in college. And Dad and Christian asked me, well, what? And I said, well, who are 4 or 5 people you respect and would honor what they have to say to you? Because he said, well, what if they say no? I said, this is a lesson I've learned in my life. Successful people love.
Yes, they do.
To help people.
Yes, they do.
I'm going to repeat that. Successful people love to help people. And I would say if it's legal, moral, and ethical, refrain from saying no to yourself.
JP,
if it's legal, moral, and ethical, refrain from saying no to yourself. And just ask. I mean, that's Matthew 7. Ask and you will receive. And he wound up, his board of directors was the athletic director at Bowling Green, professor who was retired CFO of Owens Corning, Mike Wilcox, who became his eventual boss, Marty Bodner, who was a basketball player at Michigan, and who has a twin brother, Mark, and is a practicing attorney now. And he had several other people, but those were primarily the ones that helped him. His head coach. And they, he'd have a question, he'd be confused, he had an idea, he would run it by these guys, and they would give him help. So that's the listening piece. Information interviews, absolutely. And I'll tell you one other piece that I'd like to build on yours with this young woman in the events planning. Not only does she go through the shadow, not only does she write a thank you, she volunteers to help that person
I told her,
at 2 or 3 events just to see what it's all about. Go in there and get dirty. Jeff Jenick, the former football coach at Michigan, who now is a special team coordinator at Northwestern for their football team, he told me one time, he said, if you ever want a job, volunteer for the same position. Because he was being successful in business and he wanted to go back into coaching, and he volunteered a whole season as a volunteer coach. And he's worked at Northwestern, he's worked at Vanderbilt, he's worked at Cal, and now he's back at Northwestern.
I say, and this is a bold statement, but it never goes wrong for you when you take that leap of faith and you commit yourself on that level. If you want to be in a room so bad that the only way you're going to get in there is to volunteer, if you are willing to do that, it never, this is a bold statement because the word never is, you should never say never, but I'm going to say it never goes wrong. You're going to come up with a new skill. You're going to showcase your work, especially if you work hard. You're going to showcase your work ethic to all these different people, so all these different people get a chance to see you work, knowing you're probably working for free. And all those people, all depending on where they go in their life, they're going to always think about that one person who was busting their butt like they were probably getting paid a bunch of money and actually getting paid for nothing. And they say, man, if there's somebody who I want to do work with or work for me or work whatever alongside me, I want that person because I can only imagine what they might work, what they look like if they're getting paid. You know what I'm saying? So
absolutely.
It never goes wrong, and I think that's one way. If you're a spiritual person, if you're a believer, if you really want to showcase to God just how much you want what you want, and you're willing, and it's basically saying, God, I'm gonna take a leap of faith. I'm gonna live this life in your name, and I'm gonna let you do your magic. But I'm gonna put this work in. I'm gonna let you do your magic. And that's when God does His best work. You know what I'm saying? When you
act
really
in
rely on
faith.
Him. You act in faith. So yeah, that's awesome advice.
Let me share another piece. Add to your brilliant comments, Marv. You might also learn you don't want to do that. Mm-hmm. You know, sometimes in life the lessons we learned is no. Mm-hmm. And I'll share a personal example. When I was teaching, I taught for 8 years, and near the end of that tenure, I was thinking, I think I'd like to work for a professional sports team. Mm-hmm. So I moved forward, and the bottom line was I wound up working for the Detroit Pistons in their marketing department. Mm-hmm. I left teaching and went to work with the Pistons. Mm-hmm. And it was the year they were moving from Cobo Hall out to the Silverdome. Yeah. I was hired in the marketing department to sell season tickets. Mm-hmm. I thought, man, this is what it's all about. And I got out there. I made a ton of money and had a ton of fun. And as part of my interview process, I asked the question, might there be permanent positions at the end of the season ticket run? And they said, yeah, we've hired this guy from Ohio University and this guy in sport. And I thought, okay, well, that's an opportunity. May or may not work. Well, as I was there, and I was working on commission and humping it, so I was making some big money. And I found out through conversations, discussions, whatever, these guys were hired out of college with a master's degree, and they were getting paid $14,000 a year. And I said, I found out players make the money in the NBA. Yeah. Presidents make the money.
Sure.
The guys that are doing the work, they ain't making any money.
They ain't making
Yeah. So that example for me was, it was exciting. It was sexy. It was great to tell stories. Just kind of say, I worked in the NBA for a while, yada, yada, yada. But economically, it wasn't for me. Yeah. So that was my lesson learned in that one. So let's move on to the next one. How are we doing on time here?
We got 7 minutes.
Ooh, Lordy. Okay. Let me talk to you real quick. The nothing box.
And this is cool. I'll be brief. This is cool because the next go around, you know, we got some more content. So this is cool.
Okay.
Cool.
Well, I'd like to get through the nothing box real quick, and then talk about chores.
Cool.
Because I got some feedback from Landon, our youngest son, last night about chores.
Cool.
So the nothing box, real quick, 2 minutes or less. Went to a marriage retreat. Speaker was there, absolutely spectacular. And this speaker, a woman, talked about some of the differences between men and women. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that she said that absolutely resonated with me was that men have a nothing box. Mm-hmm. If you were going to draw a picture of a woman's brain and a man's brain, you would find a nothing box in a man's brain, and there would not be a nothing box in a woman's brain. Because generally speaking, again, women are always thinking.
Sure. Men
go to their nothing box. Mm-hmm. So in my example, when my wife might talk to me and she'll say, "What are you thinking about?" And I can say nothing and be absolutely truthful. I'm not thinking about anything.
Absolutely.
And she has a hard time understanding that. Mm-hmm. So just real quick. Also, if you think about your teenage, this is for fathers, when you think about your teenage days, and you would display some behavior, and your mom or dad might say, "What were you thinking?" And we answered, "Nothing." Yeah. Now we say, "Oh yeah, that was right. I wasn't thinking about anything.
You're right.
I just did it. I did it." So think about that. The answer is true as could be.
Yeah.
So that's a quick thing over the nothing box. The next one I wanted to chat with you because when I was preparing for today, I spoke with my youngest son, Landon, about fatherhood things, and one of the things he said, he brought up were chores. Yeah. And what Julie and I developed was a weekly chore schedule that was written, and it had standards, it had timelines, it had quality expectations, and it had a deadline of noon Saturday. So every Sunday there was a new chore list done, and some of the chores stayed the same for everybody. So there were 5 of us in the family, and we each had a laundry day, Monday through Friday. At that time, I was a full-time father, so it was like Monday, and we did it according to to age. Landon brought his youngest first. So Monday was Landon's laundry day. Tuesday was Graham. Wednesday was Christian. You bring it down during the day. I'll wash it. It'll be folded. You take it up, put it away. You clean your bedroom. Noon Saturday, that was the deal. Okay, so not only was the chore list there, so we had ours, but some of them rotated. Who's shoveling the snow this week? Who's mowing the lawn? Who's sweeping the deck? Who's cleaning the garage? Those kind of things.
Sure.
So those rotated, so everybody didn't get stuck on the same thing. And it was on a clipboard, and it was on the counter in the kitchen. And the requirement was when you finished the task, there was a highlighter there. You highlighted the fact it was finished. The chore thing, in addition to it being clearly explained, it also had consequences.
Okay.
That if you failed to complete your tasks, and sometimes if you got, if you were ill or a surprise trip came up, that kind of stuff, that was okay. You had consequences, and as with the consequences, you had earn back standards. So I believe that sometimes the best way to teach boys is pain. Not cruel pain, but pain. So it would be things like losing your iPod, losing your phone, losing television privileges, computer privileges, or whatever. And then the earn back standards was we would do a daily tick box activity. When you've done this. When you've done this 5 days, when you've completed all 6 of these requirements, then you can get it back. You got to do it 5 days in a row. If you miss a day, then you got to start again and do it 5 days in a row. So what Landon taught me, or Landon shared with me last night, is the consequences. He liked the fact that it was mutually developed and easy to follow. And it had consequences. And he said that is such a valuable lesson. He's seen so many of his friends that don't understand that relationship, responsibility, consequences. And then with the earn back standards, it wasn't critical. It was because, and not only that, but this was all written and each of them signed it. So whenever there was a disagreement, I just pull it out. I say,
and you're not the bad guy in this situation.
We've agreed to this standard. That's what we're both working toward. Do we want to redefine the standard? We can be open to that. But right now, this is what we agreed to, and this is the document you signed.
So you're accountable, and it's not you're not the bad guy.
I'm not the bad
guy.
And
if anything is the bad guy, you are the bad guy because you signed it.
Yeah. I still love you, son.
Yeah.
But I can't. This is it. I can't do anything. This is what we agreed on.
That's the real world.
Yeah, that's the real world. And so I call that agreement management. Is before there was a crisis, before there was a disagreement, before there was a dispute, we'd already figured out if this happens, this is what's going to happen.
Sure.
This is a responsibility. You've agreed to it. These are the consequences. You've agreed to it. Now, if it happens, I love you. I'm going to support you. And you're going to painfully get through it. Hopefully it's only going to be one time. One of them had it multiple times.
Sure.
One of them had no times, and that's the way it is. So you're exactly right. Exactly what it did is reduce the personal conflict between me, between Julie, and between our sons.
Yeah. Well, that was awesome. We got 90 minutes. Got 90 minutes of content. And we could go on. Can
I ask Lad one last thing?
Yeah.
I just read a note Landon said last night. He said, Dad, our chores helped me, my brother Graham, my brother Christian, to learn how to grind, which is perseverance.
You're right. Well, we'll end on that. So hopefully you enjoyed JP. We'll definitely do some more pods together, and he's got so much stuff that I learn from every time that we get a chance to talk. So I'm going to end this, and then I'll be seeing you. I'll be talking to you soon. But greatness lives on the edge of death. I am not afraid to die. I will fight for my dreams. I will celebrate my dreams, and I will die for my dreams. Thoughts are things, and everything starts off as a thought first. It springs from a place of mindfulness and clarity. Get you a mentor, or get you a coach. My name is Mark Fox Jr. Done.